love watching these guys sing. You know, I tremendous amount of respect for Mike, and appreciate it. This guy he lives what he sings, and so appreciate that. And I'm a huge fan of the team you had up here this morning, Mr. Mike. So if you're new, if this is the first time here for the last 5 weeks, this is week 6. We've been talking about this idea of how we connect with God, and today we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to talk about how connected people who are connected to God, we're going to talk about how they interact with each other. All right. Now, again, one of the things that we always assume this is that there's people in this room who do not believe in God. So if you're here and you don't believe in God, we're glad you're here. We think about you when we talk, when we sing, the things that we talk about, the songs that we sing, we think about you. I thought Mike did a tremendous job of explaining why we're singing a love song to our God, because He's changed our lives, so we do love Him. But we always assume that there's someone in the room that doesn't believe in God, or someone who may not understand God, or someone who is not yet a Christian. And that's okay. We're glad that you're here, and this is one of the reasons our church exists, is to create an environment where you can come in, you can experience the love of God, you can experience the love of people, a friendly, safe place. And we always say this, look, we can't force anybody to have a relationship with God, but we're trying to set up a first date, right? Maybe you see something about God that intrigues you, or maybe you want to experiment with faith a little bit. This is a great place to start, and so we're super glad you're here. But one of the things we're going to talk about today is how do people who are connected to God, how do we interact with one another? So we've established over the last several weeks that the way we connect with God is by trusting in Jesus, all right? So we're not going to do a lot of review on that. If you've missed that, you can go online, church180.tv, and catch up on all the teaching there, all right? Now, the Homeowners Association, where I live, has a Facebook page. It's a private Facebook page for its residents to interact in. And there's a place to voice concerns or share information or just give updates, whatever. And I typically use that page. I stay aware of what's going on in our community. But recently I've actually started to lose interest in what's happening on this Facebook page in our community. Because this actually turned into a lot of whining and gossiping, which kind of happens on Facebook anyways. Can I get a witness? All right, okay. But what I've found is, on this particular page, people are getting on there. There's a lot of whining. There's a lot of complaining about how their neighbors let their dogs go pee in their yard, or how their neighbors are parking in the street, and just a lot of complaining and whining and even gossiping. And once this lady was on, she was talking about going on and on and on about how this lady would walk her dog through the neighborhood, and she would always stop and let her dog pee in this person's yard. And so she gets on Facebook and goes off about it. And so I took the liberty to mention to her that she might actually want to say something to that individual, as opposed to letting the rest of us on Facebook know who don't walk our dogs and let them pee in her yard. And that was an interesting conversation. But, at the end of the day, I started to lose interest in this Facebook page because, just a lot of whining and complaining. Now, if that only happened on the neighborhood Facebook page, I could deal with that. But the unfortunate thing is that kind of behavior is not limited to my HOA's Facebook page. Can I get a witness? It probably happens in your HOA, and it probably happens in your workplace, and it probably happens in your neighborhood, and it probably happens at your family reunion, and it happens maybe even in church sometimes. Now, I hate it when that happens. I particularly hate it when it happens in church because it's not supposed to work like that. Now, I'll just shoot straight with you. In our church, I'm not aware of a tremendous amount of gossip, and I'm very, very excited about that. I'm sure that probably it exists, but I'm not aware of a lot of it. And I think probably there's two reasons that I'm not totally aware of it. One is, one of the reasons I'm not aware of gossip in our church is because, right here, I don't listen to gossip. I'm not going to be on the receiving end of gossip. Now, here's something to consider. Let's just take a second. This requires a sit. If it seems that people keep gossiping to you, if you just feel like I just keep being gossiped to, people just keep coming to me and gossiping to me, and they're telling me all this stuff, and it, I don't know why. It could be that perhaps there's something about you that makes them feel like you're a good place to dump gossip. I mean, think about this. Most of us, when we walk around the park, we aren't going to drop our Chick-fil-A bags on the ground, right? Most of us, when we walk around the park, we're going to look for something like this in which to dump our garbage. And so I would just simply say that if people keep telling you all of the latest, or if they keep telling you all of the salacious secrets for which you should pray, it might be because you're leaving off a signal that says, leave your trash here. Can I get a witness? I mean, I honestly, like, one of the reasons I don't listen to gossip is because there's nothing I can do about it. It doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make them feel good. It's not helpful for anyone to participate in that exchange. And so I've come to think of it like this. If I cannot be a part of the solution, I don't need to be a part of the conversation. If I can't be a part of bringing some kind of a resolution to this problem, then I don't need to be a part of the conversation. Now, again, I don't know that a lot of that happens in our church. I don't think that it does. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. And I would just say, I want to give you a high five. Like, come on, give me a high five. That's awesome because, I mean, this is one of the ways, and I'm going to show you in just a minute, this is one of the ways that connected people interact with one another. We don't gossip, right? And I'm just going to tell you right now, one of the bad raps that connected people, that churches have taken for years, is that we're a place of gossip. I just want to tell you, if you see that happening in a church, the leader of the church, Jesus, is not okay with that. So the first reason that I don't think we have a lot of gossip in the church, number one, is I just don't listen to it, right? And I would encourage you to take the same position. And if you continually are hearing gossip, it might be because you got a sign on your t-shirt, right? All right. So, but the second reason I think that we probably don't hear a lot of gossip in this church is because I've said it before, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there again today. And it says like this: if you come to our church and you gossip, please stop or leave. Right? Like, if you're a part of our church and gossiping is just a problem for you, let me encourage you to really think about stopping. And if you can't stop, then this is not a good place for you. Now, I love you, okay? Everybody good? I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, I promise, all right? But, look, I would just say this. I would say there are lots of organizations that have this issue, whether it's a homeowners association, whether it's work. I know there are lots of people at work, they just feel like it's just, the water cooler effect, where they get there and they gossip and they tear one another down and they criticize and they whisper over their shoulders. They're just, and there are churches that are included in this too, and they just create an awful place to be because of what the members do to one another. The gossip, the complaining, the criticism, the whining. And I'm going to show you right now how to stop that. I'll show you how to stop being a part of a group that gossips. Here's what it looks like. The fire goes out for a lack of fuel, and quarrels disappear, say it, when gossip stops. Like, there's so many organizations that could be healed by using this verse. When gossip stops, quarrels begin to go away. Gossip stops when we stop listening to it. Just like, hey, I don't know. 'Cause I've actually said this before, not to be impolite, but if you're getting ready to dump garbage into my life, I don't know, and I've said this, like, I don't know that I can't really do anything about it, so it's probably not good for me to hear it, and it's probably not good for you to say it, so let's not have this conversation. And I would honestly encourage you to do it so that quarrels begin to disappear and fires begin to go away. Solomon said it like this. He said, look, a gossip tells secrets, so don't hang around with someone who talks too much, right? If you just find that people keep telling you gossip, it might be because you have a sign on that says dump your trash here, or it might be a sign that you just need some new friends. Right? If people keep sharing gossip and keep talking about other people into your life, maybe it's time to pay attention to what Solomon said. Hey, maybe you just shouldn't hang out with them so much. Now, let me tell you why this is so important. Because in our church, the assumption is that we're all broken somewhere. Every single person in this room is broken somewhere. Every single person, starting with me, is broken at some point. And one of the hills that we said we'll die on is the hill of honesty. Like, in other words, we value being honest with one another. Our church, I do not want to be a place where we play church. I do not want to be a place where we put on our Sunday face and our Sunday clothes, and we come in, and we play fake on Sunday, and then we do real life on Monday. I do not want to be a part of a church like that. And so we've said one of the things we'll value consistently is honesty. That's why we talk about when we're doing good, we high five. And when we're not doing so well, we're honest with one another. We encourage, we pray for one another. Now here's the thing. If I'm honest with you and you go and gossip about it, you've destroyed my trust. And you've also destroyed the reputation of the church. Not just this church, but the church at large. And let me just be very clear. I want to be very kind. But if you gossip and you can't stop, you really should find some other place to go on Sunday mornings. I love you. Now here's the truth. We're a group of people. Every single one of us in this room. We're broken. But we're healing. Isn't that good? Like, we're getting better. Like, we're connecting to God. And we're getting better. We're making healthy friendships. Because we found a place. And this is what our church is all about. Look, this is what we say a lot. We say we want to be a place where people can discover God, connect with friends, and become a better person. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to be honest with you. And when I share my heart with you, and when you share your heart with me, it needs to be in an environment of trust. I trust that when I speak to you about my weakness, you're not going to go and gossip about it. Because if you do that, I'm not going to trust you again, right? And our church exists to be a place where people can come in and discover God and not be ratted out. Discover God and not have their secrets told. Connect with friends, build healthy relationships. I'm so fired up about our life groups because it gives you an incredible opportunity to find people who are also seeking to discover God, connect with friends, and become a better person. And if gossip is a part of the life group culture, it doesn't work because we'll not trust one another, and then we'll not become better, and we'll not discover all of the beautiful relationship that God has created for us to enjoy. So we want to be our church, Christians, people who are connected to God. We're to be different than most gatherings of people. We don't want to be people who are noted about all the things we complain about or gossip about. But there are some times when there is a problem and we do need to talk about it. So how do people who are connected to God address problems? Particularly problems with other people. So the first part of this whole thing makes sense? I mean, I'm glad that nobody got up and left. That's good. That's a good sign, right? Well, that was hilarious. Last week I literally said, if you wonder what circumcision is about, go ask Joe Call. And somebody got up right at that moment and walked out the back. It was hilarious to me. But nobody left here, so this is good. It means that people aren't gossiping. Good for you, right? But there are times where we've got an issue. There's a people problem, and we have to address it. So the question is, how do people who are connected to God, how do we interact with and deal with one another when there's a problem? So, we've been reading, and we're at the end of a letter that St. Paul wrote to a church that was in the city of Galatia, which is in modern-day Turkey. He wrote them a letter, and he said, look, here's how connected people interact with God, and here's how they interact with one another. This is what he said. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. So let me just point out a couple of things here. First of all, and let me ask you a question. If who is overcome by some sin? Another believer. That's important. We've covered this before, but it's worth saying again. It's not our job to judge people who don't believe in our God. It is not our job. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul is very clear about that. He says to the church, he said, it is not your job to judge unbelievers. Don't look at people who aren't Christians and try to judge them. That's God's job. It's not your job. And one of the huge problems that the church has, one of the image problems that the church has, is we look at people who don't believe in our God and we judge them and we criticize them for not keeping in line with our God's best ideas. Well, why would they? They don't believe in him. Right? So Paul's very clear about this. Look, if they don't believe in our God, we don't judge them. Right? We leave that to God. We love them. However, if there is a believer, someone who has said, I am a Christian, I am connected to God, here's what we do with them. If they're overcome by some kind of a sin, in other words, if they've embraced some kind of a destructive behavior, or if they've got an attitude that's dysfunctional, or whatever the case may be, my responsibility as another person who's connected to God and as a friend is to move towards him or to move towards her. But there's some criteria that first have to be met. Does this make sense so far? Everybody good? Are y'all still freaked out by that duct tape thing, or are we good? All right? All right. So Paul says, listen, if a believer, someone who's connected to God, someone who openly says, I'm a Christian, is overcome by some sin, so they have an attitude or a habit or something that's destroying them, Paul says, you who are, say it, godly. Now, let's talk about that word. Let me just give you some advice. Like, you never take financial advice from your broke buddy, right? That's good? And we never, don't take marriage advice from your divorced uncle. He's probably not going to give you the best advice. And for God's sake, don't take spiritual or life advice from someone whose life is falling apart. Okay, that just makes sense, right? And now Paul says, look, you who are godly, you're the ones that should go and give instruction. You're the ones that should go and have the conversation. Now, I'll do this a lot, but this word here he uses godly. If you look at other translations, see, when Paul spoke, he didn't speak in English, he spoke in Greek, and so his letter was written in Greek, and we have translations of that Greek. And we have different versions. There's a New International Version, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard Version, the King James Version. Every one of those versions translates this word godly as spiritual. In fact, I love the New Living Translation. That's what I teach from. That's what I read. If you look in the bottom of the footnotes of your New Living Translation, you'll see that an alternative translation for this word godly is spiritual. Does that make sense? Is not too much? Got that? All right? No. Remember what we learned last week about connected people? That when they trust in Jesus, his Spirit actually moves inside of us and starts living inside of us. And this is what St. Paul wrote last week. He said, since we're living by the, say it, Spirit, let us follow the Spirit's leading in every part of our lives. So Paul's essentially saying here, look, these are spiritual people. People who have the Spirit of God living inside of them. People who are following his leadership in their lives. People who are listening to God. And to these people who are following, they're connected to God by trusting in Jesus. The Spirit of God is living inside of them. Paul says to them, look what he says. He said, let's not become conceited. Let's not become arrogant. So when I come to you and I talk to you, I'm not going to come in a spirit of pride or arrogant. I'm better than you. Let's not provoke one another. I'm not going to come and pick a fight if I see a problem in your life, and you shouldn't do that to me either. And you shouldn't be jealous, right? We shouldn't be jealous. Paul says, look, don't do these things. If the Spirit of God is living in you, we're not going to do these things, especially when we're confronting and speaking into one another's lives. Now, this is the kind of person who's ready to do what St. Paul said when he wrote these words. Brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly or you who are spiritual should, say it with me, how should we approach them? Gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. I like this kind of person, right? They're not going to be arrogant. They're not going to be spiteful. They're not going to be secretly happy that I'm falling apart. They're going to be gentle, and they're going to be humble. They're going to try to help me get my feet back under me again. And this is the beauty of the church. This is the beauty of people who are connected to Jesus and have the Spirit of God living in. I love you enough to pull up a seat across the table from you and say, man, I'm really concerned. How can I help? And it's not like I got all my stuff in a row too, right? I mean, we're all working on this. Gentle, humble. I love what James Montgomery Boyce said. He wrote a commentary on Galatians. He said this. He said, what is wrong in the life of a fallen Christian is to be set straight. So we got to address this stuff, right? It's not to be neglected or openly exposed. So in other words, if I genuinely love you and I see something falling apart in your life, I should love you enough to say something It's not to be neglected. On the other hand, it's not to be openly exposed. In other words, I should say something to you, period. No gossip. There's no point in involving someone who can't help us help you. There's no point in involving someone who can't help you help me. It's not to be neglected. We don't let it go. But neither do we openly expose. This is how connected people interact with one another. In the church in general, but in our church in particular, in Church 180, when a believer is making decisions that are destructive, those who are following the leadership of the Holy Spirit in their lives and who know and love that person are to gently and humbly help that person get back on track. And that's why life groups are so important. Look, I mean, let's just be honest. On Sunday mornings, we get in here, we smile, we put deodorant on and put our cologne on and fix our hair, all right? We do these things on Sunday. I mean, hopefully we do these things as a matter of practice, but we put on our best on Sunday mornings, right? But when we get to know one another in deeper relationship, we begin to find out that you have issues, and I do too. And in life groups, when we get to know one another and love one another and care for one another, then we begin to grow. We discover God, connect with friends, and we actually become better persons as we invest in and help one another get our feet back on the path. However, when we do address the brokenness in one another, Paul says this. He says, look, be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. So in other words, if you're addressing a matter of pride, you see someone who comes across as very arrogant and they're off-putting and they're harsh. When you leave that conversation and you get in your car, be very careful to not allow yourself to feel smug and superior. Paul said, don't be guilty of the same thing that you just addressed them of. And then he says, look, here's what connected people do for one another. He says, look, we share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Remember, we've been talking for the last 5 weeks. There are lots of Christians who say, I got to keep all the rules to be a Christian. I got to do this and this and this and this and this, and I can't do this and this and this. And Paul's like, look, this is how we're made right with God. You trust in Jesus. But for those of you who really want a rule, here you go. Share each other's burdens, and this is how we keep Jesus' rules. We care for one another. We love one another. We help one another. We don't gossip about one another. Connected people love one another enough to help one another, even if it means a bit of a burden. And there's one more thing. St. Paul says this, and I really like this. By the way, at the end of this teach, if we have enough time, we're going to field a handful of questions, 3, 4, 5 questions. So if along the way I say something and you're like, what? Go ahead and get it ready, and we'll put the number on the screen at the very end, all right? There's one more thing that St. Paul says, and this is why I actually like St. Paul so much. He says this: if you think you're too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. You're not that important. He looks at all of us in the church, every single one of us, starting with me, and says, if you think you're too good to help someone, you're not. You're not that important. Essentially, connected people, here's what we do. We're looking out for one another, looking for ways to encourage one another, looking for ways to love one another, looking for ways to build one another up, occasionally having difficult conversations with one another because we love one another so much. Doesn't that make sense? So in our church, we love one another enough to bear one another's burdens. And that means that I can handle ugly things about you. And it means that you can know the ugly things about me. And will not tear one another down with what we know. Instead, we pray for one another. We help one another. We encourage one another. And if you think you're too good for this, Paul says you're not. And I would just say you probably won't work at Church 180, and you may not even be connected to God. If you're not willing to share one another's burdens, if you're not willing to hear someone's ugliness and help them work through it without telling everybody else, I think we could probably make the case, according to what St. Paul is saying, that you may not even be connected to God. No. One of the reasons that connected people are able to gently and humbly help one another is because we do what St. Paul says right here. Look what he says. Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else. Here's what I've found. Tell me what you think about this. The people who gossip the most are the people who are working on themselves the least. Huh? Isn't that amazing? The people who have the most trash to dump in your lawn are probably the people who have the most trash in their garage. Blake Lively is she's an actress, she's a celebrity homemaker, and I like what she said. She said, look, people gossip. People are insecure, so they talk about other people so that they won't be talked about. They point out flaws in other people to make themselves feel good about themselves. And Paul said, look, I want to tell you the best way to prevent gossip. Here it is. Work on yourself. And you'll end up with plenty to keep you busy, and you'll like the end result a whole lot better. See, at the end of the day, here's the truth. Like, you can change no one with your gossip. You can lose some friends. You can destroy the culture of an organization. But when you work on yourself, you can build things up. You can build people up. You can build organizations up. Paul says, look, work on yourself. And then he says this, because we're each responsible for our own conduct. I can't change what you do, but I can change what I do. So I like to think about it like this. When it comes to connected people, here's what we do. Connected people talk less about others and work more on themselves. And this really is how connected people live. People who are connected to God we're not talking so much about others. We're not complaining so much about others. We're certainly not gossiping about others. Instead, we're busy working on ourselves, investing in making sure that I'm looking more and more like Jesus, that every day that I'm loving better, that I'm listening better, that I'm helping more. Now, one of the ways we work on ourselves is through exposing ourselves to good teaching. So, for instance, there's a ton of good books. I hope you're reading good books. There's podcasts, there's conferences, there's mentors, and there's even pastors. There's all kinds of resources available to us to help us work on ourselves. And remember who Paul was writing to here? He was writing to a church, and so this is what Paul said to the church. He said, look, those who are taught the word of God should provide for their teachers, sharing all good things with them. Now, this brings me to one of the 5 goals we outlined on Wednesday night. If you weren't here Wednesday night, we're gonna be rolling out these 5 goals that we believe God is calling us to. But let me just quickly go over them, and then I want to focus on one in specific. We believe that God has, over the next couple of years, called us to do this, to call people aggressively to go public with their faith. And I would just say to you, next week, we are having a baptism service. And if you have kind of teetered on the edge, you're like, I think I want to line up behind Jesus, this would be the time. And one of the things Jesus said is, he said, I want you to be on my team, but I want you to let people know you're on my team. And here's how we do it. We do it with baptism. And basically baptism means when I go down old and dirty. I come up clean, different, new, washed. If you've never been baptized, if you've never gone public with your faith, I encourage you to do that. It's a public proclamation of a decision that you've made to line up behind Jesus and to be on his team. I really encourage you to do that, and we're going to be encouraging people more because it's a big deal to line up behind Jesus and let your family and let your friends know that. We're going to do that next week. If you're interested, you can talk to one of the pastors after church. You can send us an email or hit us up on Facebook through the week, but I encourage you to do that. We're going to do that. We also believe that God is calling us. At some point, I love our church. I love every single person here, but there are people out there who don't yet know or have experienced the love of God, and so we have to consistently continue to reach out to the people who are not yet in here. And so we said we're going to work to minister to over 200 people every weekend. That's what we're going to do over the course of the next couple of years. We're also going to help plant a church in Dallas, Texas. If you weren't here on Wednesday night, we've been working behind the scenes with a church planter. He actually came here for a while. And while he was sitting here, God called him to go to Texas and start a church. His name is Frank Mensa, and he was born in Ghana, and God has placed him at a place right between Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas, in a large African community. They started with 6 people. They've already got 20 people who are meeting in a house, and God is calling us to partner with these people behind the scenes. And we had him on Skype. It was really cool. We'll be telling you more about that in the weeks and months to come. Another thing that we said is we believe that over the next 2 years, we want to begin to work to relocate. Somebody can, and what I mean by that is at some point, we're leasing this building, and the Normans have been extraordinary to work with. We're so blessed to be in a place where they own. However, we know this, about every year and a half or so, we have a conversation that goes like this. Well, you guys might need to move. And at some point, we're investing a lot of money into a facility that isn't ours, and we know we're going to have to move at some point. And so we believe it's incumbent upon us, and it's wise to begin to look for a place that's our own. And so we're going to begin to set money aside towards that so that we can make a smart, mature move financially, all right, as we move out, and we'll talk more about that. Somebody came to me on this week and said, "Are we moving?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Is our church moving?" Yes, but not tomorrow, and not next month, and not the next month. But at some point, and we're going to stay in this vicinity. We believe God has called us to be in this arena, all right? But just in a couple years down the road, but we begin to work about it and process it now. And the final thing that we said, we believe that God is calling us to, that actually gets to this topic right here, is that we believe God wants us to bring another one of our pastors on full time, so that he or she can focus a full effort on caring for you and the people who will come into the ministry of Church 180. And so we're going to be talking more about this over the next several weeks and months, like I said. But today what I would like to encourage you to do is to think about this, right? Like, how can you invest in, I mean, I would encourage you to start thinking and praying and planning about how you can invest in those who teach you God's best ideas. Now, I would just tell you this morning that one of my favorite people is Sue Laufenberger. Sue, where are you? Just go ahead and put your hand up. She's right there in the back, real shy, kind of doing this. And Sue makes me bean soup. And I think that's what St. Paul was talking about when he said, those who are taught the Word of God should provide for their teachers, sharing all good things with them. I'm pretty sure he meant bean soup. And she does that for me. And Sue, God bless you, my family hates it, but I love it. So in the church in general, in our church in particular, we're not, like, we don't ignore issues, but we don't gossip about them. We love one another to be quiet and help. We work on ourselves constantly. This is what connected people do. We follow the leadership of God's Spirit inside of us. And to those who still might be unclear, St. Paul wraps up like this. I'm going to read to you what he says. Make a comment, and then we're going to text, all right? This is what he says. He says, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant, right? You will always reap what you sow. And then he said this. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. Let me just stop. I love you, and I hope you love me too much to watch me plant stupid. Because you know that someday I'll reap stupid. If I plant destructive habits, I'll reap destructive habits. I hope that you love me enough to not gossip about me, but to help me, and I'll do the same for you. This is what connected people do. He said, those who live to please the Spirit of God who lives inside of us will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. And then he said this. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we'll reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. And so I would just say, because there probably some of you are in here today that have been doing good, you've been working, you've been doing the right thing. It seems like it doesn't pay off. Paul says, and this Paul says, hang in there, keep doing good. It will pay off. Paul wraps up. He says, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, and then say this with me. Especially to those in the family of faith. The church, the connected ones, we care for one another. We love one another. We work on ourselves so that we can be better for one another. This is how connected people live. In other words, this is what we do. The church should be filled up with broken people who are following the leadership of the Spirit of God. We're helping one another. We're working on ourselves. We're a place where people, anyone, can discover God, connect with friends, and become a better person. Now, let's do this. Handful of questions. It's 11:12. But you already know that because you watch your clocks while I'm preaching, don't you? And then we'll go home. That's the phone number. You can text in if you have questions. I usually, so this is a great question. This is actually from one of our pastors, and you'll understand why in a minute. He said, I usually don't like asking for prayer because, and he's saying this might be how some people in this room think, because we've said to you, if you want to ask for prayer, there's a connection card when that goes around. Put your prayer request in. You can send a prayer request on Facebook. You can send a private message on Facebook. You can email a prayer request. So he says this, I usually don't like asking for prayer because of a fear that it may turn into gossip. Perfectly legitimate concern. How does C180 provide opportunity for prayer requests that won't become gossip columns? Well, let me tell you this. We have a prayer team. And one of the first conversations we had with our prayer team was, it went like this. I had it. Gossip is the one thing, right? Well, is one of a few things, right? But just it's the primary thing. That, I mean, if it happens once, I'm sure you guys aren't going to do it, right? But if it happens, like immediately, we'll come to you and ask you to be off the team. Don't gossip, right? When you private message prayer requests, our pastors pray for them. If our pastors gossip, I mean, that's a game. You can't be on the team if you gossip. You can't be in leadership if you gossip. You can't be on a prayer team if you gossip, right? So when you send in a prayer request, it is prayed for by people who hold it secret and who love you and pray for you. That's a great question. Here's another one. You mentioned life groups a couple of times. Isn't this just another Bible study? How would this help me? I can read the Bible at home. Good question. There may be some Bible study, but listen, it's more than just a Bible study. It's a group of people, right? I mean, I think about this all the time because I hear people say, you know, I can be a Christian and not go to church. Yeah, you're right. You know, and I hear people say, well, I can be strong and not go to the gym. Yeah, I mean, again, you're right. But why would you ignore those incredible resources? Like, why wouldn't you take advantage of the incredible resource of the church? You're surrounded by people who are on a similar journey. You're surrounded by people who have similar stories and people who are working hard to become better and people who are reaching out to God in faith. And it's an incredible resource to you. It's essentially like saying I'm not going to go to church is essentially like saying I don't need that resource. I got it on my own. Church is an incredible gift, especially in an environment where we're honest with one another and don't gossip about one another and are consistently seeking to help one another. So, I mean, you're right. You can be a Christian, not go to church. But, gosh, it's such a great resource. And one of the greatest resources about the church is the relationships that you form in life group. A couple more. Can you tell people about the repercussions of gossip? Example the person talked about. You know, I think it was John Wesley once took somebody, you know, he was trying to illustrate the damage of gossip. And I think it was him. He basically took him up on a hillside and took a feather pillow and ripped it up. And the feathers just went everywhere. And he said, now here's the thing. Like, we can try to get these feathers all and we can sew up the pillow, but there are some feathers that will never come back. They'll always be out there. This pillow will never be what it originally was because it's been compromised. And when you gossip, you tear somebody's reputation apart. Like, you do damage to them that may not be repairable, right? And at the same time, you also diminish your own reputation. Because if I recall correctly, the verse that we read from Solomon, from Proverbs, he said, look, a gossip tells secrets, so don't hang out with people who talk too much. Like, you will lose friends. If you're friends with a gossip, don't tell them anything because they'll tell it. If they say it to you, they'll say it about you, right? So, this is good. I want to reach out to a certain fellow Christian and help her because I care about her very much, but her presence in my life is emotionally destructive. What should I do? Read the book Boundaries, for starters. The second thing I would say, and I've had to learn this as a pastor, like, I'm not Jesus. Right? And here's what I mean by that. Jesus can fix anybody if they'll let him, but I can't. There's some people that I just can't help. And once I became okay with the fact that I'm not Jesus, and I just realized that for us to be in the same room is going to be emotionally destructive for one of us, or maybe physically destructive for one of us, like this relationship is never going to work. It gave me freedom to step back once I realized I'm not Jesus. I can't fix them, but he can. And he'll bring someone else into their life that will help them and that will love them if they'll receive it. So that to me was tremendously liberating to realize that I don't have to fix everybody. I can't fix everybody. I got my hands full with Paul Peterson. Do you know him? How can you help someone who's been damaged by another church and is now afraid to reconnect? You know, just love them. Just be a real connected person in front of them. That's just the best way, just to be a real connected person. And what I mean by that is just a real Christian. Live like Jesus would live. You know, a lot of times we as Christians don't always represent Jesus well. And so people get a misconstrued perception of the church. They get a mistaken idea of what Jesus is all about. And the only thing we can do is just live like Jesus in front of them. Love them well. And if you make a boo-boo, right, you say, I'm sorry. You go back to them and apologize and ask forgiveness. That's a big deal. Okay. That's it. Jesus. We love you and we want to represent you well. And there are times we've gossiped and we ask your forgiveness because we've hurt our brother, or we've hurt our sister with our words. We've told things that we shouldn't have told. We've listened to things that we shouldn't have listened to. And I pray for each one of us, every man and woman in this room, that we will not gossip. And I pray for our church that we will not be a place where gossip is tolerated. I pray that God, when we begin to hear gossip, we'll step up and say, hey, I can't help the problem. I can't help to be a solution here, so I don't need to be a part of this conversation. They'll actually just cut it off. We don't want to be a place where that happens. We want to be a place where we're quiet, but we help. Where we don't neglect issues, but we don't gossip about them either. God, we want to be a place where we love one another enough to speak into one another's life without destroying one another's reputation. This is how connected people interact. Help us to do this well. Forgive us for our failures, Lord, and make us strong men and women who love one another deeply. We'll give you praise in Christ's awesome name. Amen. Now listen.